Welcome to this FourthRev event, which is exploring the career prospects in the field of product management. After successfully launching our latest career accelerator in conjunction with King's College and also some major technology partners, we wanted to take the opportunity to explore any questions that you might have about what a career in product management might look like for you. My name's Tracy Shuff. I am a career coach at FourthRev, and I work with individual learners, helping them discover what a great career path looks like for them, and then giving them the tools, the techniques, and the confidence to go out and get it. I've been a career coach for 11 years or so now, and I absolutely love what I do, which is why I have a passion for helping others find careers that they love. Before that, I was in recruitment for 20 years, so I understand what it looks like to be the opposite side of the fence. The agenda for today is quite simple. In a minute, I'm going to ask our two experts, Janna and Laura, to introduce themselves. If you have any more questions, hopefully you can add them to the Slido link that's up on the screen right now. Well, that's the agenda. So what I'd like to do is ask Laura and Janna to introduce themselves individually. As well as introducing yourself, I wonder if you could also, Laura and Janna, just answer a quick fun question. The question is, if time travel were possible, where would you go and why? For example, for me, I would go back to Henry VIII's court. It combines my passions of history. I love history. I love politics. I'm a bit of a masochist like that. And the politics were obviously really interesting at that time. And also I love reading, and the Hilary Mantel, Oliver Cromwell novels at that time are fantastic. So that's my answer. Janna, can I ask you to introduce yourself first?
That's a great question. So hi, I'm Janna. I am one of the co-founders of ProdPad, which is product management software. It's a B2B SaaS tool that I built because I was a product person who needed tools to do my own job. And like a lot of product people, I ended up started creating something, and it turned into a business of its own right. So happy to talk about my journey of how I got into product and how to, my journey of how I ended up, taking that product journey into something that was so much more. Now, that question about time travel, really good question. I mean, either I wouldn't go very far at all, because I think we're living in an amazing time. Maybe 20 years earlier, there's some amazing things that, could have been done 20, 30 years earlier, or far future. Let's see how this all turns out, right? What happens after all of this? But I wouldn't go way back. I think we've got it really good where we are. I like modern living.
Great. Yes, the future sounds a bit scary to go there, perhaps. Laura?
Hi, everybody. I'm Laura. So I'm a product consultant. I've spent the last 10 years or so working in EdTech at organizations like FutureLearn and the Raspberry Pi Foundation. Before that was a primary school teacher, so I did a career switch of my own in I think it was 2012, 2013 was when I switched from teaching into product. I'm really glad to be here today. Thanks for inviting me, FourthRev. Time travel is really difficult. I don't think I would be able to resist the temptation of going sort of 50 years into the future, let's say, to see how things have panned out in terms of, I don't know, it seems a bit doom and gloom, but in terms of climate change in my area and the sort of life that my daughter is living, I think that is where I would be nosy about.
Yeah. And in classic product management fashion, I think we're missing information. I mean, we want to ask more questions here. Can we come back? Or are we just stuck there?
Yes.
Well, we'll leave those questions to another day, but yeah, a valid point. I was also interested in the fact that two product managers both looked forward. Going way back, I think that's probably says something about us. Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks very much for those introductions, and I'm sure we'll get to know you more as we go through the questions. So can we start with the questions? Okay, so these are questions that you have asked us. And as I say, please feel free on Slido to keep asking questions. So can we start with the top one? So how easily can one pivot into product management?
I mean, I love this question. I mean, somebody can pivot into product management so easily sometimes that they do it accidentally. I mean, I know a lot of product managers who sort of fell into it and were doing product management before they were actually given the title of product management, right? I mean, oftentimes the product manager is the person on the team who's the jack of all trades, the master of none, picks up all the little bits around them and is like, well, you know, I'm a developer, but I'm also good at talking to the customers or asking questions that are outside the remit of the dev area, or I'm actually in customer success, but I'm trying to get in there and trying to figure out how things work and how I can help the customers more than just answering their support queries, or I'm in marketing, but I'm really curious about how this is going to work for the business or how we can technically pull this off. So it's all these people who sort of step outside their lanes, outside their remits, and oftentimes get you know, sometimes annoy the people around them to the point that they get the job, or sometimes just get the extra jobs plopped on top of them until they actually are the product person. That's frankly how I got the job. So it wasn't a deliberate pivot into product management, but it was a you know, an easy one, I guess, because I sort of fell into it. I think it's changed a little bit now in that people are making more deliberate steps into them, as in, you know, saying, hey, let's go get trained up into it. Let's learn what this role is. Because if you fall into it like I did, you make a lot of missteps, and you often do end up stepping on toes and going and doing things the wrong way, long before you find out the right way of doing things. So I think it is healthier doing it sometimes a slower, more deliberate way. But yeah, it's not hard per se if you're willing to step outside the bounds of what you're working on.
Great. And I think what you've highlighted there as well is the range of skills, the variety of things that you do as a product manager, which may be a surprise to some people, but it must make the job really interesting. Yeah.
And I've seen people come from all different backgrounds. I mean, Laura, you were a teacher before. That's cool. I mean, how did that come about?
Yeah, so yeah, I am definitely a person that fell into it. So I was sort of involved in teaching kids to code and like the sort of digital making movement as a teacher, and then sort of took the first opportunity that came my way to work in a tech organization and leave teaching, even though I loved it. And I didn't step straight into product management. I was in more of a sort of leadership program manager type of role. And I started to identify that the things that I was most enjoying were the things around creating digital experiences for our learners and our volunteers at Code Club, which was the organization I worked for. And then I can't remember how, but I sort of discovered that there was this thing called product management. And I thought, that's kind of what I'm doing. And that sounds really interesting. And then I think I kind of took a sort of sideways step into a role that was actually called product manager at FutureLearn. And that's when I really started to get into the like craft of product management. So I think, yeah, as Janna said, there's lots of people like me that kind of sort of just end up doing it and are sort of naturally sort of drawn to it, or sort of like naturally fill that role in an organization. So I think it is something that you can pivot into, you know, sometimes fairly easily if you've got an existing company that's making digital products. You can sort of overstep your current role, or sort of, you know, look around and see what's going on. Where I've seen people struggle to kind of get into product management is when that opportunity isn't available to them in their current organization or company, and they can find it quite hard to find entry-level product manager roles in other organizations. And so I think that you know, courses like the one FourthRev Planning are going to be really good for that, because it's going to be able to give people ways to demonstrate that they have the skills, and then hopefully, you know, make that step into the more junior or associate product manager roles. But I think the really good thing about it is that you can take skills and things that you've learned in other roles and apply them to product. I still every day think, oh my God, this is exactly the same as when I was being a teacher and things like that. So there really are kind of transferable skills from other disciplines and other forms of work.
Thanks, Laura. And as a career coach, what I noticed there is when you started thinking about career in product management, is because you were noticing the things that you were enjoying doing, and absolutely encourage everyone to do that. You know, what are you noticing that you're loving, and that's what you want to replicate. I think that moves us quite nicely on to the next question of the biggest roles. What's the biggest roles as a product manager?
You know, product manager takes on a wide range of different things. I mean, one of the biggest things that they do is a communicator. They're constantly working with a wide range of different stakeholders in their team and constantly having to figure out how they can orchestrate the different pieces that need to happen, right? So they're not the coder, they're not the one coming up with the marketing copy, they're not the one doing the designs. I mean, sometimes they end up dabbling in that stuff because that's the life of a product manager in reality, but they're not supposed to be. What they're supposed to be doing is actually pulling together the different players who are excellent at these different areas and getting them to work together and orchestrating these activities. And so it takes negotiation, it takes communication, collaboration. And so that product manager is constantly pulling together you know, meetings and brainstorming sessions and you know, basically playing the role of the go-betweener. And sometimes that is like you know, sitting back and letting people, you know, work on a brainstorming thing, and sometimes it's actively pulling things out of people. It really depends on the situation.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Another area that we should definitely highlight on that is that an area of product management that a lot of people are going into now that's becoming more and more popular is the area of product operations, which is less about the product management itself. Because what a lot of product managers are finding is that product management itself is a big job, but then there's the whole job of figuring out, like, what are the processes behind product management? What are the tools we need? You know, how do we manage all the data and all the stuff that needs to stick together so we can do our jobs? And that's like a, you know, for a small team, a part-time job for the product manager. For a larger team, that can become an entire other person's job. So when, you know, this question sort of triggered this idea of, you know, the biggest role, well, it's actually a separate role altogether, which is separate from being a product manager, but is kind of what a lot of product managers are kind of doing today. So when you're thinking about product management, like, well, do you want to be the operational product manager, or do you want to be the down in the details, like, you know, working with the customers, working with the stakeholders, doing the product management itself?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. It's that there's so many different paths you can take. Product management isn't one thing. It's lots and lots of different things, as you know, Laura's video sort of outlined. So it is working out the bits. Do you want to be that specialist, or do you want to be that jack of all trades? And that would determine what sort of project manager you'd be. Okay, thank you. Next question, what's your one piece of advice for someone starting out in product management? Laura, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I was beating you to it there, just going for it. Yeah, I think my one piece of advice to the people that I've managed who are new is always just to spend as much time as possible getting to grips with all of the insight that's relevant to your part of the product or product that you're managing. So I think that it's really important that when you start out, you're seeking out any information that already exists. So any, you know, customer data or previous user research or market research, and you're kind of absorbing all of that information and, you know, slowly starting to become the expert of the part of the product or the product that you're managing, because I think that is critical in order to be able to make credible decisions going forward. So you have to very quickly get kind of abreast of all of that information. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's also Oh, sorry, I was distracted by something then. I've lost my point. I'm sorry, Laura. I was too distracted. I've lost my point on that one.
No
Do you have
worries.
anything to add there?
Yeah, I mean, Laura had a great point there, like getting to grips with, you know, what the lay of the land is really, you know, talking to everyone, making time to meet with all the key stakeholders, you know, take advantage of the fact that you've got fresh eyes, that you've come from somewhere else, whether that's, you know, grad school, or whether that's from, you know, a teaching career or a career as a lawyer, or wherever you've come from, a developer, whatever it is, you've got fresh eyes on this, and that's valuable, because you can't assume that the company that you're joining knows what it is that they're doing. Like, it can be really helpful to call out these questions that you have and say, hey, why is it done this way? And, you know, how has it been done so far? And, you know, teach me. And by doing so, you'll start unpicking why they work in certain ways, and possibly help the company figure out, you know, maybe better ways of doing things as they go.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. In any sort of role that you go into when you're starting it, you have this clarity of vision that others who've been doing the job for a while don't have. So it's a great time to notice what's different, what you see from your perspective, and share that, because it can be some really, really valuable insight. The other thing I was going to say before I got distracted was before you even start, I would really seek out individuals who are doing the role. It's great, you know, you're listening to two experts here today, but equally, you know, if you can seek people out in your networks, LinkedIn's fantastic to do this, to make it more real for you, to get the advice from, you know, a number of different people. And I think that will really help you make your decision.
Yeah, to add to that, I mean, one of the best things that I did as a not quite starting out PM, I wish I'd done this earlier, was found another product manager and got this idea of, well, let's run a meetup for product people. And this is where the idea of Product Tank came from, was getting a few product managers together. And that Product Tank grew into this huge network, became Mind the Product, this huge network of product people all over the place. And it became like product therapy, getting a chance to just meet with other product managers and share, you know, what's going wrong with our jobs? Why is it so tough? You know, how did you deal with this tough problem? And, you know, each time we got together, we'd share a beer, share a story, share whatever, and we would learn about how to further our own craft. And, you know, as a whole, product management grew up because of this, but each one of us learned so much more. So definitely get involved with your local product management meetups, and, you know, learn from your fellow PM. So much you can pick up there.
Great advice. Yeah, thank you. Okay, next question. Do you have any recommendations for blogs, resources, mailing list, people to follow in the field of product management?
I mean, I've got all sorts. I just mentioned Mind the Product, so definitely follow that blog. I mean, I post a mailing list. If you want to find me on simply Bastow on Twitter, I have a regular post that goes out there. Anything that Teresa Torres writes on the subject of continuous discovery is brilliant. Anything Kagan writes is always really sort of few and far between, but always on point. Ken Norton has started posting again, Bring the Donuts on his blog. There's some really great people out there. So yeah, start digging into those sorts of lists, and you'll find more and more as you go down.
Great, thank you. Laura, can you add to those?
Yeah, I mean, I think Janna's mentioned all the big names, and I definitely second signing up, especially for Mind the Product, I think, because I think that their content is very accessible, like even for newbies. So I think it's really, really good. There's a recent list that I found I really like, that is a product management reading list written by Mike Hudak, who used to be this CPO at Monzo. And he's basically compiled this really massive list of articles and books that he thinks is really good. So I'll pop a link to that in the chat as well, because I think that is almost like a one-stop shop of a reading list.
Excellent. Taking notes.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Do you have any tips for what needs to be in your application for a product manager post?
A really good question. having sifted many applications in the last 10 years or so, I think that there's some very simple things that some people forget to do, which immediately make me feel a bit more interested in reading somebody's cover letter or their CV. And one is to say why you want to work at that organization. So often when you're sifting through CVs, you do get a lot of applications for product manager roles. They can get quite samey, and it always stands out to me if somebody in the first sentence just neatly summarizes like, why this role, why your company, why this company. So I think that's a little cheat thing to do. The other thing is, don't try to overcompensate if you don't have that much experience on your CV. So quite often I find people that are trying to get their first product manager job really overcompensate in their cover letter. So they'll send me this, like, I don't know, like a 3-page cover letter on why all their skills are transferable and that kind of thing. And I personally don't think it's necessary. So I think you can sell yourself in a kind of briefer way, and also help the person that's sifting the CVs kind of get to know you and your motivations, I think is really important. It doesn't have to be, here's 20 reasons why I meet each of the the job description items. Keep it short and brief and snappy. Why do you want to work there? Why do you think you'll be good at product manager role? And pull out some of those things that are transferable if you haven't been a product manager in title before. So tell us like where you've done product manager adjacent things in the past and what impact you've had.
Yeah, and to add to that, I always recommend, as a product manager, your job is to find the right problems to solve and then solve those problems. And no two product manager roles are the same. So no two applications should be the same, because no two jobs are going to be the same. So what you should do is figure out what the job actually calls for, what problem they're trying to solve by hiring that product manager. And if you can, if you're the right person for that, then outline why you are the person who's going to solve that problem. And as Laura said, it should be short and succinct. You should be able to say, I'm the right person to solve this problem for you. You have this problem. I'm here to solve it. Here's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I agree with what you both said there. I think it's a matter of not overcompensating, as Laura said, but also embrace your difference. Sometimes people are worried, or I come from a slightly different background, but that's what makes you special. That's what makes you different from, people that come a traditional route, perhaps. And that means you'll, as we said before, you'll bring a different perspective. So it is about working out what they really want, reading between the lines of that job description, notes say that these are the 3 or 4 things that I'm bringing to the role. But also, as Laura said, it's about your motivation to want to do that job, working for that organization. So do your research, add into that covering letter why that organization and why that particular job, and keep it succinct. We don't need War and Peace. Okay, thank you for that question. Next question, can you talk about the differences between a project manager, a project PMM, and a product owner? Sorry, a product manager, a PMM, and a product owner. Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So a product manager is the one who generally sits between the business, the user, as in the what the user needs, and what the technology, the tech team can feasibly pull off. Classically, the product marketing manager sits a little bit closer to the marketing side, and so is often as the go-between and is working using the product as a marketing tool. Specifically as a way often to gain growth as a particular metric. So it's sort of like a somewhere between product and marketing. It takes different shapes in different companies depending on the company's goals and aims and things like that. And then product owner is a special thing in itself, because product owner depends on the company again. It depends on the country as well, because if you go to certain locales, like if you go to Germany, for example, product owner is often what people would consider product manager based on the job titles and all that sort of stuff. But I'm going to go with the more UK, US centric version of it, where product owner is generally considered a scrum role. It's more of a project management role aimed at the, aimed at teams who do scrum or, like an agile project management process. And it classically isn't actually a person. It's a hat that somebody in the team wears, but has been notably misunderstood over the years and is sometimes given a whole title and somebody to go do that job. But if you do have a product manager and a product owner in the role, typically what you're going to have is the product manager is the more strategic, working on things like the discovery and the strategy and figuring out, what are the problems to solve and how are we going to go about doing that and who are we solving them for and laying the path ahead. And the product owner is the one breaking it down and figuring out how it sort of stacks together into the sprints to be done. And if you got a product marketing manager and all of that, then they might be the go-between with the marketing and the product team with comms and getting feedback and a whole bunch of other things sort of on the marketing side. Again, hugely depends. Titles are a difficult thing in this space. I mean, honestly, spend more time paying attention to the job description and understanding that, because the titles, aren't transferable between companies. You might be a product manager in one company and then go to apply to a product manager in another company and find out that it's actually closer to being a product marketing manager at your previous company, or vice versa. So don't put too much weight on those titles. Actually just figure out what the job description is that best matches your skills and what you want to do. And then if needed, negotiate the best title to fit that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more in terms of don't get hung up on job titles. It's amazing. Different organizations call the, all sorts of jobs, all sorts of different things. So it's focus on what you want to be doing. What are the key things that you want to be focusing on, and almost use those in when you're doing a search for jobs online, rather than necessarily job titles. Thanks, Janna. Do you have anything to add, Laura?
I mean, I agree with everything that Janna said. I think the interesting additional thing might be that sometimes different organizations at different levels of their, let's say, sort of like maturity of understanding product and product management may have different conceptions as well. So I think it's really important to, as Janna said, look at the description. And if you're interviewing somewhere, basically ask your interviewer, what do you think product management is? Do you have product owners as well? How are they different? And I think getting behind the organization's definitions will really help you work out kind of what type of job you're applying for and what type of role you'll have once you're there.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we've got an interesting question here. Sorry, I'm going not to the one it says latest question, I'll go to the one above. What are the best and worst things about product management?
People. That's the answer for both. No, but that's honestly it. It's such a people-centric role that, if you are, and you've got to accept that it is a people-centric role, otherwise it'll just drain you, because it can bring out the absolute best in you and the business and the capabilities of the product if you're able to work with people and bring out their best. If you're working with a good group of people, it's incredible, right? It's empowering. And if you're working with a disempowering group of people, it's the worst, right? Every time you talk to people about what is irking them about product management, it's the people. Every time you talk to people about what they're loving about the job in product management, they're having a great time with the people, right? It's a team sport more than anything else.
Interesting. So is there anything you can do to change when the worst bit of people? Is there anything you can do to change that?
Yeah. In To some degree. It's a big question. It totally depends on where you're coming from and you know what the state is in play, of course. But the product manager has a big play in setting the example for the team, right? So creating a space that people feel safe speaking up and coming up with ideas. You know, if somebody comes up with an idea, you know, not just saying, no, we're working on my ideas. Like, that's not the job of the product manager. The job of the product manager isn't to have the answers. It's their job to ask great questions and to bring the team along with the journey, to create transparency into the product management process so that people don't think it's this black hole where ideas go to die, to translate the harebrained ideas from exec to the rest of the team so people understand what's going on up there, right? Because the product manager often has, you know, almost unrestricted access to what's going on at the business level, whereas the rest of the team is sort of put in their boxes and told to go do their jobs. So the product manager can be the friend to everybody, can be a helper to everybody, but they can also be really difficult if they want to be.
Demonstrating the right behaviours as product manager will help. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Laura.
Yeah, so I think like the best things, I'm trying to think of like the bits that I've enjoyed the most, and it's really when I've been able to create some kind of order out of chaos. So like the moments where everyone's pulling in different directions, there's no kind of like cohesive picture about what's going on or what we're going to do next. And you know, I've been able to use my people skills and my kind of analysis skills to kind of create a narrative almost that everybody gets behind, and you know, some actions forward that people are buying into. And that is just, I mean, I sound like a bit of a megalomaniac, but it's just a really fun process, you know, and doing that, you know, by building consensus with the people in your team, I think is really important. And when I've been able to do that, you know, you've got a really tangible impact on how people are feeling every day, you know, because you may have had designers and engineers or other people you're working with that until you came along, they were like, oh, this is crazy, I don't know what's happening. And you've given them, you know, some certainty, and you've also been able to have an impact on the product. And I think that's the best thing about it. And I think the worst thing can be sometimes thinking back to, you know, when product managers that I've managed have like come to me feeling like a bit dismal or whatever, and it's usually because they have let the kind of people aspect that Janna spoke about kind of pile up, and they're sort of feeling a bit too thinly stretched or a bit too reactive, because they've got such a sort of like overwhelming amount of input from other people. So I think that you have to be able to be quite tactical and proactive about how you manage that level of interaction and input from others. It is difficult. I mean, I find that really hard, but I think that there's, you know, lots of things you can do to, you know, carve out thinking time for yourself and carve out ways of working amongst your stakeholders that make those things a bit more manageable.
Great, thanks, Laura. Some great insights coming out of that question. Is it important to develop a niche as a product manager, for example, EdTech?
No. I mean, if your product is, if you move into a product and the product then is in EdTech, then it becomes your niche because you're working on that one product. That's what you know. But you could then easily go move into FinTech and go work in something, you know, a B2B SaaS product after that. You know, I've seen product managers bounce around and take skills that are completely transferable. So you don't have to just stay in EdTech once you have it. But yeah, you will become a nerd in your particular area once you actually work with that product for a couple of years or at least a year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think most people tend to, you know, what you learn in one sector or on one type of product is definitely transferable to another. So I think, yeah, you don't need to stay in your niche. I, however, have chosen to because I am incredibly passionate about education. And I think I'm quite unusual in that regard. Like, you don't get that many product people that sort of specialize in an industry. So I guess it's kind of up to you what you want to do.
Yeah, and I would just add, it's finding the things that you love doing. Laura said there she's passionate about education, so it's great for her to have become an expert in that field. So, you know, if you find something you love, you know, why not develop it as a niche? But I think also what's been said is you don't have to. Okay, next question. I've found most product management courses focus on software as the product. I'd be interested to know what you're planning on catering for a service as a product. Interesting question. Anyone feel able to answer that?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I think a lot of people in product, I'd be interested to hear what Janna thinks of this, are increasingly thinking about services and the kind of like bigger picture around a product, because obviously the software doesn't exist in isolation. So you do have to think about all of your touch points with your customers, from, you know, how they first become aware of you, until, you know, they become a repeat customer, or a brand loyalist or whatever, or, you know, they churn and go somewhere else. So I think people are thinking a lot about that end-to-end experience, increasingly. In terms of are we planning on catering for it? Yes, definitely. And so I think that you'll find that is mentioned in the course.
And, you know, keep in mind, you know, a lot of the times when we use this word product, most of us aren't actually talking about classic products. I mean, most of us aren't building, you know, a physical, you know, product that you ship in a box and the person gets to keep forever. You know, I mean, ProdPad, for example, the product that I build is software as a service. The clue's in the name. It's a service. You get a login to a web app, and we update the web app over time. Most of the product managers that I work with, that I talk to, build some sort of service end of a product that involves the product is an ongoing service, and they're worried about that experience as opposed to something that they ship and forget. So yeah, when you're talking about product management, oftentimes you can switch it out for service design. Like service design is like a whole other area, which you could almost just say is the same as like the flip side of product management, and they're using the same way of thinking, just completely different terminology. It's quite funny, actually.
Great, yeah, really interesting question. I think that was the difference between product and service and the way forward. I think we've just got time for one more question before we need to wrap up. So how do things like design thinking, human-centered design fit into product management as a discipline? Another really interesting question.
I mean, design thinking and human-centered design are both a bit of jargony terms that represent things that are sort of intuitive anyways. I mean, design thinking is just a way of sort of formalized a way of working that allows us to you know, brainstorm ideas and then prototype them and make sure that we are reducing the risk of what we're building before we actually build it. Human-centered design. Well, yeah, we want to build things for the humans who use it. Now, there's some formalizations around it, and product management people should know about these things, but don't get too tied to any of these things, right? It's always good to know the huge raft of different buzzwords and processes and standards and things that people will throw at you, all the different books that people will have read and say, oh, have you read this? And I'm working this way, and we used to work that way. Cool, know them all, and then pick and mix the ones that work best for you, and try not to get too, don't fall in love with any one particular one, because you're going to find as soon as you try to do it, you're like, oh, we're doing design thinking. You're going to hit a wall and go like, well, you know what? We got to stage 3 of it, and turns out our team needs to work in this slightly more flexible way. So think about it more like jazz, right? Your team all knows all the notes. They all know how to play stuff. They have a great repertoire, but when they actually get together and play, you kind of make it up as you go, and it still sounds awesome.
Brilliant. I love that analogy. Okay, well, I'm afraid we are running close to running out of time now. Just to let everyone know, the rest of the questions that we haven't been able to answer, we will answer and put in a report. So look out in your inbox for those. I'd like to say thank you very much for Janna and for Laura for giving your time today. It's been really, really interesting. Before you leave, is it possible just to give one top tip about the career in product management that you'd like to share?
I'm happy to go first. My top tip is actually something that ends up getting asked in job interviews a lot, but that's a coincidence rather than the motive behind my top tip. I think if you're interested in product management, then get really curious about the products you use and think about why they are designed the way they are and what motivations the company has for making them the way they are. So sort of look behind the products you're using, whether it's ones that you like or ones that frustrate you. Just get curious, and maybe if you're lucky, you might find that companies sometimes blog about their processes and the reasons behind their decisions. So see if you can find some blogs that kind of expose the decision making behind the products you love.
Thank you, Laura. That's brilliant.
I love that. That's great. My top tip is, as a product person, don't assume that you know what it is that you're doing, that you know the answers to anything, right? Like, don't be afraid of entering into a space that you don't know about, right? Like, you don't have to know about the education space to be in ed tech. You don't have to be an expert to be great in fintech. You don't have to know everything about product management to be great in product management. Some of the best product managers I know are junior folks who are just great at writing, communicating, asking great questions, and getting people on board with working together. It's a people skill. It's a communication role more than anything. And so, don't be afraid to just jump in and ask questions. Don't assume you have the answers. Just surround yourself with people who will be the experts for you. Use their expertise to your benefit.
Thanks, Jan. Another great tip there. Well, thank you both for your time. You've been fabulous. For those who've been attending, if you could send us your feedback, give us your feedback, that would be brilliant. We want to make sure that everyone gets the best out of these sessions. This is part of a series of events, so we will be running future events. So look out in your inbox and your social media to get details of future events, and indeed the course that somebody referred to earlier. So all that's left to say is goodbye, good luck, and hope to see you at the next event. Thank you very much.